Good morning.
Morning, Malaysia.
Today, very sober good morning.
Yeah. But more importantly, happy birthday.
Thank you. Thank you.
Happy birthday week. So it's not just one day. We are 6 months apart, almost to the date.
Yeah, exactly. Kan? So,
Yeah.
in numerology, they say that two of the same numbers don't get along well
Mm.
because
Huh.
so it's a 28 and a 28, right? So it's a
Correct.
one. So they'll say, two dominant characters.
Maybe we get along very well because you're in Malaysia and I'm in
I was
Singapore.
just going to say that.
uh,
But
so
Kirtana is
distance.
also, sorry.
Just saying, distance makes the heart grow fonder.
Okay, you stay in Singapore.
Okay.
Visit us in Malaysia, and I'll do the
Yeah.
same because I want to keep this friendship forever. All right. Good
And then
morning, Sham. Good morning. Good morning.
good morning, and we meet in Jakarta. Okay. Yeah, that's an interesting way of looking at it. Good morning, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining us today on our show. It's our last week in June, and as usual, in the last week of every month, we review, recap, and summarize what we have heard. We contextualize what we have heard, learned, shared uh, from our guests from the weeks before, right? And this month we had Azwan. Uh, it was our first port call for June on the theme of fatherhood, and we heard about how fathers his father was very pivotal, and still is very pivotal in how he thinks about decisions, how he thinks about leadership, how he thinks about his role. Then the second week we had Rueben, and we heard from Rueben how without having a father in his life, he found the replacement, if you will, from the community that he was in right from the start, from when he was a child to right now. How community is very much part of building his resilience and building his strength as a leader. And then we spoke to Naga and Malar. Naga, what did we learn from Naga?
I was
Got you,
trying to. I was trying to browse Facebook because I can never get Luis Mariah's comments on Facebook up here. So I thought I'll
Oh, I
do
see.
this, and he said, happy birthday, thank you, Luis. Yeah. So with Naga, we learned what it means to actually build, what it takes to build a nation, right? Because I think with Azwan and Ruben, what we learn is how the individuals grow to become a person who then becomes a leader, the personhood in leadership, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
that shows up in the spaces that we take on in leadership. And I think Naga amazingly divided them into 4 different type of leaders, which I felt that was so practical and precise, right? And how that actually impacts the choices and decision that they make for the people entrusted to them, right?
Yep.
How it delays development, right? Because the leaders are ready to do the right thing, if I may say, right?
Yep.
Then, of course, last week was Lawrence, and Lawrence actually really helped us to wrap up everything. Yeah, put everything by introducing us to the idea of equilibrium, right? And the idea of what it means to bring in the masculine and feminine energy. And for me, I thought one of the most brilliant ideas that I took back from Lawrence is that to see how the landscape of the business world has shifted, right? Has changed, right? And that means that we need to check in whether the type of skills that is required in our different business landscape, whether it's our family, a small business or larger organization and the countries we live in, what sort of skills that's required required? Do we, and if it's feminine, which is what seemed to be happening, right? More feminine energy is required. Whether the leaders, who probably male or female, who tend to bring in more masculine energy because that was appreciated, right?
Mm,
Valued
mm, mm,
now know how to shift that. I thought that was a brilliant closing, and of course today we are here.
mm. Mm, great. Um, we had we had very we always have uh interesting chats with our guests, right? I like June because I think it gave space and it has space for all of us to listen to the masculine side uh, of well-being, right? And I thought it was just nice to bring it up. It's one of those things that we don't talk about so often, like you were saying, right? When you talk about diversity and inclusion, it's usually about, not always, it's usually about the women. How do we make women more? How do we get women more included in leadership and things? So yeah, no,
Yeah, and
I'm
I
just
think
patting myself on the back.
no, yes, I'm very actually I'm very grateful because I think there's so much of stuff going on. There's a loud voice for women empowerment, and
Mm,
it's important to bring in
yes,
put a voice for the women because
sure.
we are now charting new territories, which is the corporate world, right? But
Mm,
I think very often I don't know, right? Being having been in the working space for the last 30 more than 30 years, right? What I realize is that every time we make a decision, we make one or the other. It's, do we
mm,
centralize or decentralize, sort of, right?
correct,
Then we keep
correct.
going back and forth, right? So while we are looking at women being empowered and we are doing a lot of the things right, and the voice is getting louder and sometimes becomes a noise, we
Mm,
cannot deny the fact that if you don't look out for the men and the issues that they
mm,
are having, we're going to create another imbalance. We're going to think we are balancing out, but we're going to create another imbalance. And I think that's why this conversation becomes important, and the type of speakers we had, I think, were amazing because these
mm,
are men who are so brave to come and tell you, hello, we also have feelings. Don't judge
mm,
us. You will never give us
mm.
a chance. And please, we are just human, right? I think we need
Yep.
more men to feel courageous going against the odds of the noise the community has created for us
Mm,
for
mm,
generations, and to come out of that. And I think that's important. And I think the best place, if you ask me, if we might have missed the childhood, we might have missed the schooling bit, all the cultural damage done
Mich-
already. I think
yep.
organizations hold such a very strong position in helping and shaping people, communities, and nation. And I think that's the space that
Yep.
excites me, bringing all
Yep.
of it together.
Exactly. There's still hope because if organizations can make a difference, right? Right now. Yep.
Hope is the only thing we have. I'm going to say, Jay, good morning. Thank you for joining us. Jay, join us on LinkedIn if you can. For some reason, I'm not able to bring.
Oh.
Yeah. I'm not sure why, but good morning, Jay. Good morning, Lewis. Yeah, try and jump to the other side, but otherwise, I'm looking at your comments as well. So let's get started because I think we've got a lot of information to share. Hi, Sundar. Good
Mm,
morning. Thanks for joining us. I believe all the way from India. Uh,
mm.
yeah, tell us a little bit more about yourself, Sundar. What you do and stuff like that, so we can get to know you. And while we do
Yeah.
that, Sean, we've got some interesting data to share with the
Yep.
audience today, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
tell us what we're doing today.
Huh? What are we going to do today? Is it you are going to share something, then I'm going to challenge some of the things that you're saying, and, and then we may or may not be friends at the end of it. But I think yeah, we'll see how it goes. Okay, all right.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
All right. So what we've done is we've summarized the four. So not summarized. We sort of integrated whatever the
Mm,
four scientists have told, and we brought in some statistics for us to actually understand or see what is the data saying. Is it something that we are talking because it makes us feel good and everybody's talking about it, or
Mm.
is masculine care really, really necessary? So I really hope, if not now, later, some corporate leaders will be watching it, and we will not just think about it and talk about it, but act on it, because these statistics are as old as the ones that shows up for the feminine energy, or generally we categorize feminine as women. Just want
Mm.
to, for those who are listening, we're looking at energies. We're not looking at male, female, but today we are focusing a lot on men because it's the month of June. So we are associating masculine energy to men, but we all know
Mm.
masculine energy is not just associated to gender. So we're using
Yes.
it interchangeably only for today because we are focused on the wonderful men in our lives, right? So
Yeah.
leadership
Mm.
in flow. So this month, we focused on fathers, and we're going to look at how to lead masculine care, right? If you are in leadership position, are you looking after the men or the
Mm.
masculine part of energy in your organization, right? So
Mm.
this is interesting, right, Sham? So if I'm not too sure how many men are still talking to us. Louis, I hope you can comment and on LinkedIn, please, if you can, because Louis is one who is very comfortable with his feminine side. I mean, he's a personal friend,
Mm.
so I would say that. In fact, I would say he's the only man I've met who's most comfortable, yeah, who's able to express it well, at least in the
Mm.
friendship. So the masculine ideals, right? So this one was shocking for me, the first one. This one I didn't know, right? The others I knew. It might surprise us that boys are more emotionally expressive than girls before age 2.
Ah.
This was a surprise for
Okay.
me because I have a son, you have a son.
Yeah.
While I was conscious about not suppressing my son's voice, don't cry and all of that, I did it
Mm.
too. And
Mm.
then I
Mm.
tried to correct it because it's just different when the boys and the
When
girls
it's
cry. Yeah, but
yeah, correct.
I was not aware that they are actually more emotionally expressive, and that brings me to that space to imagine how much more suppression the boys have gone through.
Mm. I think this emotionally expressive, sometimes, yeah, we tend to think expression is the visual or the verbal, right? Or when you cry, and therefore you see the person crying, or you hear the person crying. My son is 17. He still gives me hugs,
Yeah, we saw
right?
it publicly too.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. But some people may not. So, yeah, so I think there is some element of truth in it. I think it may be because they need it more, perhaps. I don't know. I've read books about how boys, as children, need more touch, need more mother's expression of, seeing the mother's expressions and things like that. So, yeah, I'm actually not surprised.
Oh,
Counter to you.
I didn't read about boys needing more, but what I know is that when boys' needs are not, this I read this yesterday, the boys' needs when they are not met, because
Mm,
traditionally how sometimes we think boys don't need it, and we entertain more of girls' need for it, physical hugs, expressions, I love yous,
mm,
and boys
mm.
eventually also, right? Even if you like my son, I mean, I'm a hugger, right? So my son is literally forced to hug me if he wants anything, right? I don't quite care. So what's really interesting is that I realized that a lot of times the peer pressure gets to boys at some point where,
Yes.
right, you don't hug your
Mm,
sister, you don't hug. So that's the space I come from, right? But
mm,
my son is 12. He's still good. I count my blessing every time he's able to express, not only physically, emotionally, he's able to express what he's thinking and feeling about it, right?
yes.
But
Yes.
we also do see that, I mean, I've grown up among boys, how they're expressive in the family, and slowly, even within the family, they begin to distance because the peer
Mm,
pressure has got to them.
yep.
And so,
Yep.
what I read was that that's why, and men don't express their needs, emotional needs, even to their spouses, right?
Mm.
And so one of those articles when I was reading about fatherhood is that they were talking about how men feel threatened when when their wives have children or they have children, right? Because
Mm.
the women typically will switch from their
Yep.
spouse to the kid,
To the
right?
child.
And
Yep.
now the
Yep.
man feels the loss of that feminine needs, feminine love,
Mm.
and that's because they don't have it, they don't ask for it, and they find it in their romantic partners. I thought that was interesting. Unfortunately, my husband wasn't like that. he didn't he probably was like, I got rid of my wife, now she's not hanging on to me. To hang on, right? But when I never understood this when my some of my friends went through, right? So for
Mm.
me, it is really interesting that we look at symptoms and signs and we talk about men as if
Mm.
negatively. But I think it's time we look at the root causes and say how we have made
Yeah.
them become like this,
How did
and
they
what.
become like this? Yeah. Right. And work
Yeah,
backwards. Yeah. That's
yeah.
right.
Bruce Perry will say, don't ask why, but just say you find out what happened and
But
shift those things that
yep.
happened.
Yep.
All right.
Yep. Yep.
And and I think the second bit is something that we all have heard of, right? Common responses to young males who become emotional. Boys don't cry, man up, don't be such
Mm.
a baby, don't cry like a girl, be a man,
Good.
get
Yeah.
you throw like a girl. So the last one is something I've seen my son go through, right?
Mm.
You throw like a girl. And because he was gentle when he started playing football, I think when he was about 6, and
Mm.
he had difficulty going back to the same space. And I
Mm.
saw him also transitioning from not wanting to be in that space and then speaking like them.
Mm.
One
Mm.
day he came and said, "Girls don't play football."
Yep.
From and of course I'm the mother, so too bad. And we had a night. I thought it was interesting because we always say children take things from the family. My husband is not
Mm.
like that at all, right? And I'm
Mm.
thinking, where the heck did you pick it up? And so when
Because that's the environment, right? Yeah. Right.
and then his speech was so quick.
Yeah. It was interesting. Mine is the other way around. So I had caught my husband a couple of times say, don't only girls cry, don't cry,
Mm,
right? And I saw a shift around where he came and said, girls football. What does that mean? I mean, what kind of football is that? It's not like as it's not as good as boys playing football. Until he went to play football one day, and one of the people who came to play football was a 16-year-old, an 18-year-old girl representing Singapore. That conversation never happened again. All
ah,
right. Right. So it's in a way a switch around in terms of the environment, shifting the perspective, right? And of course he has me as a mother, so whenever he says girls can't do this, and that's going to have a different conversation that's going to happen for him. But yeah, there you go. that's uh,
and
that's column number two, right?
And
Yeah.
I have to say this in case my son listens, right? My son plays basketball now and he goes for regular practice at the local park. And my daughter doesn't want to join him because it's all men, all male club,
Boys, yeah.
all boys
Okay.
club. And Lucius always reminds her, Lil, know that you are as good as me and sometimes even better. So I don't think you should let this stop you.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So in case he
That's
is
all
listening,
Lucius. Okay. Yeah.
Lucius.
It's all Lucius. That's all Lucius. Okay. Talk about that one.
Okay, so let's talk about cycle of depression. So now what's interesting is that we often look at women as weak and women go out there and say they're depressed, right? But hey,
Mm.
men are also depressed. And so what are some things, some of the symptoms is eating disorders, erectile dysfunction, fatigue, feeling sad or angry, but showing rage and anger to appear masculine. So this is something we've
Mm.
experienced. Unable to perform daily chores. Haven't we heard women gossip about how men are so lazy at home sometimes? Increased
Mm.
irritability. I mean, for women, they'll say PMS and stuff like that. For
PMS, exactly. Yeah.
so lack of concentration, lack of interest at work and in family, lack of sleep. So this is where you enjoy watching football games and whatever not, but because you lack
Mm.
sleep, self
Mm.
medication, attacks, and suicidal thoughts. So I thought this is really interesting because we may have just dismissed the symptoms that we saw in men because only for the reason they appear masculine in the way the community has decided, right? So anything
And
you want to
and
add?
yeah, yeah. And imagine if this is what's happening. Combine that with the fact that you're not supposed to talk about it,
Mm, mm,
right? This is what happens with women. We talk
mm.
about it many
Right,
times,
right.
right? Here you have the masculine side. This is happening, but we're not supposed to talk about it,
No,
right?
and I think, right, Sham, if you think about men, the men, I mean, I've got a lot of great guy friends who I would say that at least, they tell me I can ask them questions, right? I think there are some men who actually don't even know that something, this thing,
It's wrong.
that
Yeah,
they're
that's right.
depressed
Yeah, yeah.
because they don't
Agreed.
have the permission as men to feel that way.
Mm,
They have permission to laze in front of the TV. They have permission to say, "I don't want to do housework. I don't feel like it." They have
mm,
permission from a cultural perspective to be many things, but
mm,
not depressed. So I sometimes when I look at my friends and I feel that they have these right, and they're complaining, "I'm tired lah, I'm tired," and my
mm.
friends understand, but actually they're depressed, and they when you ask them, they don't recognize it because
Yep.
the vocabulary was never introduced to them. Whereas for women, sometimes for everything also we think we are depressed.
Yeah, correct.
When because normal tiredness, right? Because we don't
Yeah,
accept that that as part of our identity, and then we say no, no, no. I think I'm becoming depressed, right?
yeah, yeah.
So I thought that was interesting. So men,
Mm.
please pay attention to this, and I think if not anything, they'll pay attention to the erectile dysfunction. Huh? All right, moving on. That was big with Anish, right? Because that's something we don't talk about.
Mm. Mm.
It's big with manhood, and it's difficult to talk about it. Anyway,
Mm.
moving on. Not only men are strong, but they are so strong that the suicidal rates among men is higher.
Mm. So yeah, that comes from the last point in the previous slide, right? Where suicidal thoughts. So it's not just thoughts; they are acting on it,
Mm,
right? I think that's an important distinction for us to make, and I think it's important for our listeners and our viewers to also make that distinction. It's not just thoughts.
mm.
Some it's being acted on,
Yeah.
and the statistics are it's quite scary. I mean, it's quite not dramatic. Yeah, I don't know what the word is. It's scary, I think, because we don't realize what the numbers look like, right? Yeah. So
Exactly.
yeah,
So,
so it should.
when we thought,
Mm,
when men were not vulnerable, for every one woman who commits suicide, three more men did, right?
mm,
And I think
mm,
if you're a female watching it, hello, every time a man dies, the burden comes on us. So can we save the men now? Right? I mean, look at the number of single motherhood, right? When
single
man
mothers.
is
Yep.
not present, either because he's depressed or he's not present in the family because he's got other issues, which leads to other behavioral issues like addiction, right? Yeah.
Mm, mm,
See, a lot of this adds up to back to community issues, which starts from the family. So, guys, get help. Talk to us, right now. So this
mm,
is very quickly, five principal causes of death by gender. Right now, if you look at it, the topmost is actually heart diseases.
mm,
Right,
mm,
and heart diseases we know is actually very much caused by your stress levels that you hold in your body, right? So Yeah. So and then there's pneumonia, which is very much got to do with the function of your lung, right? And well, I'm not going to talk about accident. Good morning, Vinny. Oh, Vinny is saying yes. So if you look at it, so I just think we need to just start paying attention to what's causing that in terms of life. I call it lifestyle illnesses, and
Mm,
we all know that 75% of these illnesses are actually caused by emotions that is suppressed, right? And we've spoken about it in different ways, right? So, Sham, is there anything you want to add here before I show
nope.
them?
I'm going to show
So
the
this,
other one. I think that one is important.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So if you look, there's generally, so if you look at the male, female past 3 years, even last year in 2020, which is not here, we would find the male suicide rates are much more higher, right?
Mm, mm.
And and look at Malaysia and Singapore. It's on a pretty real time high, right? Sham,
Yeah.
you want to say more about this because I think
Yeah. Yeah. So the numbers are very, very interesting in this one, right? So we shared earlier, Malar, about where it's 3 times more. But if you're looking at this into a little bit more detail, one trend that you can see is its suicide rates are on a rise. If you just look at it, and we put it on chat, the access to this research, right? Suicide rates in the is on a rise. Yep, regardless of gender. Yep. The second thing is you look at between the genders, male and female, the male suicide rates are going up most quickly and most significantly than the female suicide rates, right? So my takeaway from this is that suicide is it's going to be a societal issue that we have to deal with more and more if we don't, as a society, as an organization, as a society, as a country, not do something about it. Yeah. Within that, I think we also need to look at what is it that's making men rates higher than the women's rates. I
Mm,
think, and not take it as like one whole bucket. I think there's a distinct difference between and the numbers show, I mean, that's my analysis, all right? But if you just keep to the data is quite telling. The
mm,
data is quite telling. Yeah. I think we don't need to say much more than that.
yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, just we need to pay attention.
Yeah. And the third thing, and this is my point of view. Okay. My point of view, I'm looking at the data and also the graphs that are in the report. It seems like suicide rates in developed countries or developed economies seem to be higher than those in the developing economies. So that was interesting for me as well. That kind of.
Yeah, nice, nice. I
Mm.
mean, it's we will think that when we are developed, we have more access and more hope.
Mm. Mm.
Because suicide is really about not having, having a disconnect and
Yeah.
feeling really helpless. Not wanting to wake up to another day, right? And
Yes.
I would assume we would all assume that if you are in a developed country where you have more access to resources, that would happen less, but it's happening more. So uh,
Mm.
time to think through, right? And
Yep.
depression
And
rates are also much higher. Um,
correct. Correct.
yeah,
Yeah.
depression rates are a lot more higher than in developed countries.
Yeah. So in Singapore, Maithili Subramaniam, who was a guest in our show I think it was last month, she's just undertaken a research on suicide, all right, and people who have lost family and friends through suicide. So that's a very important. I think that's going to be a very important research for Singapore to know what is it that is, like you said, what are people repressing?
Yeah.
What are people pushing down? What's happening? Why is there no access to resources, or there are resources but people are not using it for whatever
Mm.
reason?
I mean,
Yeah.
going back to, before I move on, going back to how depression shows up in men, and where they themselves may not have recognized that they're depressed, right? To a
Mm,
point of perhaps no turning back, right? So just to reiterate that, and so we looked at number one, two, and three just now, where we look at the cycle of
mm,
depression in men, and I think it's as if we are listening in, and there are more women listening in than men, at least on Facebook. So at this moment, I just want to say hello to Janice, all the way from Brunei, Rajesh Singh, my wonderful friend, and Mr. Chiu Hok Poon is also online listening, right?
ah,
And Jay and Jason. Yeah. So I think what we're talking about, we all live with men, among men, and we love them, right? So what can we do to actually now bring about the equilibrium, right? So some things that we can do is avoid trivializing depression in men, change your
mm,
expectation. I think the second one for me is big. So as
mm,
much as I can talk about it, I'm not sure how well I will deal with weak men, right, or weak
mm,
looking, or what
mm.
I think as
What
strong
is
men.
weak? Yeah.
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 So
Mm,
I need to constantly be aware, right? Because I have a lot more masculine energy too compared to my feminine
mm,
energy, right? So
mm, mm.
that comes
Yeah, you and
as,
me both.
yeah. And then when that comes as a feminine energy, I'm like, right? So
Uh,
be part of the solution by sincerely encouraging men to help themselves, help them to express emotions better. That I think, I can do. But we need to really get the conversation, and also know. I think one of those things that I find myself doing is that when men are not able to express themselves, forget about well expressed, right? We
mm,
also I'm also becoming aware that it is a skill that they never had, right? It's a habit practice that they never had. It's new for them,
mm,
and
mm,
anything that is new can be really, really difficult. Either lack of skill, lack of language, or
mm,
just the courage to do something that you're not used to,
mm,
right?
mm.
So for me, that's more of the awareness that I'm trying to be aware, even though I say I advocate emotional intelligence, right? I have difficulty with that, so I need to. I mean, just be aware lah, because you're not used to it.
Yeah, correct, correct. And yeah, and I think because sometimes we are in the space, we have higher expectations of ourselves, right? To be aware or be skilled in something, that area that we are in, right? Yeah. Okay.
Nice. Right. So we're looking at so what has this got to do, because it is the month of Father's Day, right?
Father's Day.
Looking
Yes.
at, yeah, what does it mean to us as a nation, as a world, right? So we are looking at a lot of symptoms that shows up in both boys and girls who then become leaders, right? But we're looking at the importance of the father's involvement on positive child outcome, right? So is a
Mm.
father important? Okay, like we looked at Azwan's story where the father was central, his role
Yep.
model, and then we looked
Yep.
at Ruben, who
Reuben.
didn't,
There's
who
no
didn't have
father.
no father,
Father.
but he
Yeah.
had father
Father
figures,
figures. Correct. Yes.
and that's important, right? Because
Mm.
life sometimes is just not as good as ideal as we want it to be. But do
Mm.
we have individuals within the system who can then step in and
Mm.
be the person that someone needs, right? And that's what
Mm.
we're
Mm.
talking about when we come to fatherhood. But this is really very, very quickly to look at how fathers are so important, right? And you can't have committed fathers, good fathers, um, if we don't pay attention to their well-being from childhood,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
Because absenteeism in fatherhood is not so much, it shows up in fatherhood, shows up in other roles, but it actually stems from the childhood, and
Yep.
whether they've had a chance to overcome what I would say their life traumas, right? So we can
Mm.
see here, we they earn more, and they're less likely to repeat a grade. So if you have good fathers, right, less
Mm.
likely to be suspended, likely to go to a college, less likely to have a teen birth, less likely. That's important. I think if you have
Mm.
daughters, less likely to spend time in jail. And these things are really important, isn't it?
Yep.
Because
Yep.
not only it's about family, but these are our citizens, the
Mm.
ones who, who live in the communities, who are going to coexist in the communities, and do you push them? So it's just so complex, right? That we need to
Yep.
start doing things from the
Mm.
beginning. And children who grow up with absent fathers, greater risk of infant mortality, go to prison, drop out, have behavioral issues. So this is really interesting, right? Every time when I complain about my children to anyone who's like in this space, the first thing they'll ask is your child getting enough attention?
Mm.
And it feels like any amount of attention is never enough, right? Until they become teenagers, of course.
Mm. Mm.
You want
And
to?
what more when there's only, yeah, when there's a missing father, right? I love this chart. Let me tell you why. Three things. You said the role of an active father. So just being in a family, a family circle, and the male person being there, or this person being the father, but is an inactive father is not what we're talking about. We're talking about the active father role, right? That's one. Number two is with how our culture, how things are evolving, and how family, what the family unit is supposed to be like, that it's evolving right now. I've heard many times people say it's okay. Um, he or she had a very strong parent. It was a single parent, but a strong parent. So should have they would be very, very fine. But I think this data tells us otherwise, right?
Mm,
The father's role is a critical role,
yeah,
not for beyond the obvious thing of being the breadwinner, which was several generations ago, but there are other critical parts of it, and I think we need to appreciate that. We need to remind ourselves of
yeah.
that. We give ourselves excuses, or we reframe, recontextualize what the family unit looks like because of what's happening in the environment.
Yeah, and
Mm.
Sean, just to add on to, yeah, we can say when the father's absent, we've heard a lot of heroic stories from single mothers, right?
Yeah.
I would say my mom was one of the heroes, right? But the thing is
Mm.
the toll it takes on the mother and
Yes.
on the children eventually,
Children.
because you watch your mom work so hard. So on one hand, you can be grateful, but there's a lot of space where childhood is lost because
Mm.
one person has to double up all sorts
Yep.
of people and not living their life. So these things have long-term implication on not only the parent, the single parent's well-being, in this case the
Mm.
mother, and
Mm.
it also affects the children in the long run.
Yep.
And we've seen how this trauma plays out in the next two generations is what we are discovering right now. So
Yep.
it may look like a very nice story, hero's
Yeah.
journey. It's nice
Mm.
to
Yep.
celebrate, but at what price, at what cost, and at how
Cost.
many generations, right?
Yeah.
So it's
And we don't realize it until we see data like this. And
yeah.
yeah, you know.
And
Mm.
so men and fathers as agents of change. Fathers are agents of change, influencing family dynamics, well-being, collective social actions across generation. I mean, we are here to tell you why it's so important. So we want to quickly just introduce what we call as masculine and feminine energy. Men and women have it, so it's not male female, but we what we've done is we've divided. We think these things belong to masculine, which in the past used to be associated to gender, right? So you
Mm.
talk about being present, they don't judge. So men are quite cool, they're neutral, right? Women tend to be more emotional, and we show our preferences, right? And that's the feminine energy. So here, if you look, it's a very simple way for us to just understand, what does it mean to be masculine and feminine. So what I want us to pay attention to is that, when we talk about divine masculinity and femininity, they both have positives, right? So if you
Mm.
look at feminine, we are intuitive. Our feminine energy is intuitive, grounded, receptive, strong, empathetic, compassionate. So compassion, empathy, authenticity, trust, creativity is all associated to feminine energy, right? Men Masculine, we look at honest, accountable, integrity, humble, boundaries, stability, security, and responsible. So we're doing that. But what I want us to pay attention to is the wounded feminine and wounded masculine. So if we don't grow up well, that's in our childhood, then we become wounded. This is known as childhood wounds, which then shows up as, in some ways, strength, right? Because you need to
Mm,
fight your way through. And, have we not heard of stories of female leaders who are insecure, who are needy, who are codependent, who are
mm,
manipulative, who are inauthentic, who are over emotional and act like a victim all the time? Ouch, right? And the masculine, have we not heard of the boss who's controlling, aggressive, withdraws, too competitive, abusive, right? So we've heard
mm,
all of this, and these are known as the wounded part. That means they learn these behaviors as children to protect themselves, because there were no
mm.
adults protecting them, and they bring that into their roles. And eventually, now these are successful people because they're very resilient, right? They know they're street smart, and they become leaders, and we celebrate leaders like this, and we should. However, as we celebrate their strength, we also know that they bring their wounds into the workplace, and it affects us, which then shows up in their leadership behaviors, like what Naga told. People know what's the
Mm.
right thing to do, but why can't they do the right thing, right? And that's
Yep,
what we're going to talk about.
correct.
You want to add anything before I move on?
No, we're
That
good.
was my favorite slide, right? Now, so how important it is for us to recognize and celebrate our heroes and sheroes. Now, so we took this from, I think we summarized this from Forbes. We're going to put that
Oops.
down.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
And what's really interesting here is that, for us to actually look at what is seen as 2022 leadership skills that's required, right, Sham? So if you think about it, right,
Mm,
Sham, like we looked at feminine and masculine just now, right? Look at
yep,
transparency, right? Look at trust. These are soft stuff, right? It's more
yeah,
feminine than masculine, right? Of course, when it
yep.
comes to say accountability, that's more masculine. So there are
Masculine.
some,
Yep.
yeah. So if you have more masculine energy, some things are going to be easier. But if you have less feminine energy, then being transparent is going to be difficult because you're not used to it. We
Mm,
all know that when you want to build trust, you got to be vulnerable. You need to put yourself out there. And
mm.
if you're not used to putting yourself out there, it's going to be
Or you
difficult.
don't know how to, or you still don't know how to. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or you're not
So,
aware that you need to put yourself out there.
yeah, because
Right.
you don't know what it feels like to be transparent because you've not been that, because you've actually, worked on your other skills. Not that you
Mm,
can't, but that was not what you're used to, right?
yep.
Like for women or the feminine, if you're used to talking about emotion, we can get with a cup of coffee or tea and we just, I'm feeling horrible today, right? Whereas whenever you speak to men, you ask them how you're feeling, they'll tell you how they're thinking,
Mm,
because it's a safe space.
yep.
And not that women don't do that. Women are beginning to become very masculine in that way too, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
if you look at, so what I wanted to bring up here is, if you look at the skills that we are talking about for this year 2022 in terms of what is required in leadership because of the leadership landscape, right? What
Mm,
is required for this, what is relevant post pandemic is building trust, working together, staying organized.
mm,
Structuring your business is something which I think is very masculine. Evolution is the key to leadership success. Now, think about how easy or difficult it is for us to shift our leadership style, right? Gone are the days where we can be autocratic. Even politically, we are seeing that shift. It's
mm,
not whether
mm.
you like or you don't like, whether you want or you don't want, but the pushback is real with social media,
Yep.
right?
Correct.
Right? We're all shouting out for leaders who are authentic. We celebrate authenticity. We celebrate authenticity publicly, right? But
Yes, correct. Is
publicly
it
we
practice? Yeah, is
yes.
it practice? How is it practice within a team, within the organization, right? Or even within the country? Yeah.
And what it takes, and that's authentic for you to celebrate authenticity. You need to be non-judgmental. You need to
Mm,
be unconditional. How do you
mm,
put that away, right? So
mm.
men can be good because they are more neutral, more objective, right?
Yeah,
But
that's the masculine energy, right?
right,
That's
and
the.
but can you also embrace them, right?
Mm,
Then that's like empowerment, streamline for human experience, right? Think about meetings, where meetings we only talk about objectives and not about feelings, because feelings take too
mm,
much time, too much, to manage and process, right? Uh, Preparation is a secret sauce. I think, yeah, that we are good. Lead your team with the same customer service. So, Sham, if you look at this, there is a combination of the masculine strength and the feminine strength.
reminiscent. Yep.
I think any leader who's listening in, if we are watching, we just need to ask which of these energy we naturally have a lot.
Mm-hmm.
What is it that we don't have enough that is
Mm-hmm.
required for the role,
Yep.
right?
Exactly.
And
And I
then,
think it's an important distinction required for the role, right?
yeah,
Because it's not a random thing. It's not an all income, like, everything shift the whole thing into your life. For your role, in order for you to succeed, what energies do you have and what energies you don't, and you need to, close the gap.
yeah. I just
Yeah.
want to, before we show how that's done, and that,
Mm.
before we close off, Nini on Facebook is saying, I think boys need more attention during teenagehood, discussing ideas, sharing mutual interests and companionship. Nini Chong says, yeah, Nini, I totally agree, but I think boys are only able to have that discussion in their teenage years if they're used to having conversation in their childhood years.
Earlier, yeah, childhood, yes, yes, agreed. I agree with that.
Yeah. And
Um,
the fact that your teenager can come to you and say, Mommy, I want to talk about this, Daddy, I want to talk about it. Have we given them that space that we usually give the girls
mm,
to talk,
mm,
to express, right? And so yes, we totally agree with that, Nini. But having said that, I'm just adding on. I think it all depends what we do in the childhood and the environment that we create and put them back into those spaces too.
if you extrapolate that a little bit more, isn't that the same in any team or organize in any team?
Exactly, exactly.
Right.
I mean, I think what we fail to sometimes recognize is that the person you are cannot shift much in personal and professional life.
Exactly.
The
Well
skills
said, Mother. Well
you
said.
can't, right? And we've been trying to do that for years in the name of professionalism, right? If
Mm.
I'm if I'm not comfortable in managing conflict at home, I can't
Then I'm
manage
not
conflict at work.
conflict
I'll
at
run.
work. Yep.
And
Yep.
in leadership position, where conflict is so important in building trust, we know, I mean, I know, right? Team building programs, right? Very often, why do they give you team building? Besides the fun, right? Can you please tell everybody to learn how to deal with this new leader? Actually, it's very simple.
Yep.
You just have to deal with the leader. You
True.
put
Why deal with the whole
everyone,
team? Right. Yeah.
you put
Right.
the whole
Where is
team
the
in
issue?
change,
True. Agreed.
right?
Yep.
And how much
Yep.
of resources is managed, and that's why sometimes there's a negative connotation towards
Team.
programs. People are like,
Yep.
oh, okay, now you're going to brainwash me again.
Mm.
And I absolutely love when we run a lot of team building programs, when the leader becomes involved and say, tell me how I need to be so that my team does what it needs, right? So yeah, anyway.
Mm.
Now, so we talk about these, right, Sham? So these are all masculine, feminine. We can turn them into skills. But if you're really thinking and talking about it, how do we actually know where we are, and
Mm.
how do we know which parts or which skills, or we call dimension, that
Mm.
we need to build on, right? What is
Mm.
relevant for your role, right?
Yep.
So if you look
Yep.
at feminine and masculine, and we look at to bring about equilibrium, so here we have our 18 dimensions. I just saw the S is missing now.
Mm-hmm.
I have to say it right now. So one way is for us to start first figuring out what is required for your role.
Mm.
So if you look at leadership role right now, right? if you are very masculine, you might be very strong on your resilience, maybe a little bit, average on your emotional intelligence EQ, right? And if you come from you're a self-driven personality, your motivation might be high, right? So
Mm,
it all
mm.
depends how your life is shaped and what skills, what muscles you've built. And so we have 18 muscles here. And one way for the audience who are listening is actually to look at these 18 muscles and say, which of these muscles do I need
In my
for
role,
in
for
my
my
role?
role. Yeah,
Right?
in my
And of
role.
course, because we're doing leadership in flow, we're going to look at your leadership role and whether it's leading yourself or others, right? And once you know what is required, the next thing is what I have. Is it enough?
Correct. And I need to reinforce that statement again. What I need for my role, because in Singapore, Kiasu Singaporeans, all 18 also I want, and all 18 also I want to do good in. Okay, so and good means what is good, right? So yes, so it is about what is required in your role. If it's not required, why are you bothering looking at it in the first place?
Yeah.
It's not going to be your superpower, right?
And so it's really looking into one, what is required for your role? Do you have the ingredients to be good at
Mm,
your role for
mm.
today, for 2022? And if there are core skills, core dimension that is missing, that's going to make a major difference, then that's the part we want to develop as individuals, whether it's masculine or
Mm.
feminine, wherever you
Yeah,
actually put it, right?
yeah.
Yeah. Right. And
There's a flip side as well, right? You're talking about what we need to develop, but there might be some skills core to your role that you're overusing,
yeah.
right? You're stepping on the pedal too much, and that's also detrimental. It's like as you started when we first started today's session. Why is it always in extremes? Why can't we find that balance, right? And it's the balance that we're looking at. So sometimes if you're on this side and we don't have enough, we need to develop it. And if you're on the other extreme, we need to be able to pull back because extremes are not good, and find that middle ground, that balance, that equilibrium that works for you in your role. Yeah.
Exactly.
I think, yeah.
Yeah. And I think also, right, when we look at it, this is what I have seen of very good leaders in this part of the world, right? I'm sure, hundreds of debrief for these assessments. What I've seen very consistently is that the good leaders, and no, I wouldn't call them good, the great leaders that
Mm,
I've worked with are usually overusing a lot of this dimension, which
mm,
then leads to their own burnout
mm,
and their ill being.
mm.
And people don't even realize it because they are great leaders. I mean, they're very good people who are willing to burn themselves to show up
Uh,
ID and well. Now,
yeah,
yeah, and that's something that's close to my heart because you don't want great leaders to burn out. You want
exactly.
you want to keep them in the system because they are nurturing, but because we don't have enough support, enough of the right ingredients in the structure, they end up shining brightly because they are stepping into many
Oh,
roles
yeah.
and
Mm.
putting themselves
They're
out.
holding it up. They're propping it up, right? They're propping the whole system up. Yeah.
On the other hand, you'll also have leaders who get promoted, and we talk about incompetent leaders who get promoted because they learn how to be invisible and just exist, so that they can
Mm,
survive the systems. And
mm.
in that process, they don't realize how much of themselves that they are killing, right? A part of them dies, right?
Yeah.
Beyond the fact that you've been called to lead people and people have been in their future has been entrusted to you. So here are the 18 dimensions, and we measure this in three different profiling tools. The flow profiler, which is resilience, EQ, and motivation. And you can go to www.flowprofiler.com for you to check in with these assessments so that you can understand where you are, what is required for your role, and whether you have it in the right space where you need for your role. And yeah, PM DMs if you want to have a chat about this, or even you
Mm,
want to, check in to see where you are. If you're a decision maker and you want to test this and you want to know whether this really works, we love it because it puts people in flow, which means optimal
mm,
living, optimal
mm.
performance that comes with optimal
Well-being.
living, yeah,
Well,
which then supports well-being, right? Because
mm,
we also make sure, two states are measured: your day-to-day and your under pressure, which often is ignored, right?
yep.
So with that, I think that we've covered enough. And Sham, throw to you
Yes.
summary now.
Okay. So, oh, Debbie's asking what the link. Oh, you want the link? Oh, okay. We'll put it into chat in a short while. Okay, so we have come nicely to the end of the month of June. Muller, shall we get ourselves back onto screen? Let me just do that and shift that, and here we are. And I love today's session because I think not only did we talk about the 4 guests that we had this month, we drew on their wisdom, and I think you did a brilliant job, Muller, in tying it up, contextualizing it, and looking at. I think you asked important questions. We don't necessarily have the answers to it, but I think the answers are not. I think the answers are in the leaders, right? Masculine lead, the men leaders, the women leaders. As we know, the energies are we all have both energies, right? It's a matter of where is it balanced or how it is balanced, right? It's important for us to think about this, I think. And as much as we're saying it to everyone else, I think it's so important for both of us to think about it as well. Because as you said, and you said it and I said it, we have more masculine energy than feminine energy sometimes, the two of us. Yeah. So good. I think it was a great way that you contextualized and framed it and summarized the whole month for us. Thank you, Malar. For those of you who are listening, Debbie, I'm going to send you the Flow Profiler link in a short while. But in the meantime, what I'm going to do is close today's session because we're close to an hour. Thank every one of you who has dialed in to listen or to see us or watch us. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your questions. And thank you also for your comments. Next week, we start July. And in July, we are going to focus on purpose. Why? Because we love purpose. That's one. Number two is I think it's also a very important element that's part of the working world, and organizations need to pay attention to. Okay, so I'm going to say bye from Be in Clarity in Singapore and Malar.
And Malar from Malaysia, but I need to have the last say. So
Of
I want to
course,
leave all of us with thought, right? Right. Without purpose, what are we doing here? Right? And that's exactly what we hope to cover in the month of July. So join us in the month of July. And if you are catching up, help us by sharing these videos if you find it useful. And if you don't
mm,
like seeing our faces, just, lock in with our Spotify leadership
bye.
and Food. All right. And then we'll see you next week. Bye from Malaysia. Bye, Sham.
Bye, Malar.